Tell Chris I want my shirt back. I hit send and watched the screen like it might blink first. 3 dots appeared almost instantly, then disappeared. No reply. Just silence. That was the moment everything shifted, not with a crash or a fight, but with something quieter, colder. The kind of silence that tells you the truth has already landed. My name is Ethan Cole, I'm 39 years old, and up until about 10 seconds before that text, I thought I was still married. Funny how fast that changes. The message she sent me first was simple, almost boring. Late dinner with clients. No emoji, no extra detail. Clean. Professional. The kind of message you don't question when you trust someone. And for years I did. I trusted Lily like you trust gravity, like something that just is. But trust doesn't break all at once. It erodes. Quietly. Slowly. Then one day, you look down and realize there's nothing left under your feet. I didn't reply right away. I read her message twice, then a third time, like the words might rearrange themselves into something honest if I stared long enough. They didn't. My thumb hovered over the screen while my mind replayed something small, something stupid. A missing shirt. Navy blue tailored, one of my favorites. I looked for it 2 nights ago before a work event. Checked the closet, the laundry room, even the back of the dryer like it might have slipped behind something. It was just gone. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. Clothes disappear. Life gets busy. You move on. But standing there in my kitchen, phone in hand, that missing shirt didn't feel random anymore. It felt placed. Like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel louder. The hum of the fridge. The faint ticking of the wall clock. My own breathing, steady but heavier than usual. I set my phone down on the counter, walked over to the window, and looked out at the street. Same street I'd looked at every night for the past 8 years. Same neighbors. Same parked cars. Same life. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside, something had already cracked. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. That's the part people don't understand. They expect yelling, confrontation, something dramatic. But real moments like this? They're quiet. Controlled. Almost calm. Like your brain is buying time while your world rearranges itself. I picked the phone back up, opened our thread, and typed slowly. No rush. No emotion in the words. Just precision. Tell Chris I want my shirt back. I read it once, made sure there was nothing extra, nothing that could be misinterpreted. Then I sent it. Not to start a fight. Not to get an explanation. Just to let her know one thing. I knew. And more importantly, I'd known long enough to stop reacting and start paying attention. The screen stayed still. No reply. No denial. Just that heavy, deliberate silence. And standing there in my own kitchen, I realized something I hadn't been ready to admit before. I wasn't waiting for answers anymore. I was already past that. I was watching. And whatever came next wasn't going to be an accident. Her silence did not surprise me, but the speed of it did. Lily was never someone who stayed quiet when she felt cornered. She filled gaps with words, explanations, half-truths dressed up as reassurance. But now there was nothing. No follow-up message. No call. Just absence. I set the phone face down on the counter and let the quiet settle in around me like it belonged there. A few years ago, that kind of silence would have driven me insane. I would have called her. Asked questions. Looked for reasons to believe whatever answer she gave me. But that version of me had been fading for a while now. The truth is, this did not start tonight. It started weeks ago, maybe months, in ways that were almost too small to notice at first. Lily used to text me throughout the day. Nothing big. Just little check-ins. Coffee runs, complaints about meetings, a photo of something she thought I would find funny. Then those messages got shorter. Less frequent. Then they stopped altogether. I told myself she was busy. Her job had been picking up new clients, longer hours. That was the story I accepted because it was easier than questioning it. But then came the dinners. At first it was once a week. Then twice. Then it felt like every other night she had somewhere to be that did not include me. Client dinner. Networking event. Late meeting that ran long. Always work. Always reasonable. Always just believable enough that I did not push back. I remember one night in particular. She came home just after midnight, heels in her hand, moving quietly like she did not want to wake me. I was already awake. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft click of the front door. She slipped into bed beside me, her body cold from the night air, carrying a scent that was not hers. Not strong. Not obvious. But different. I almost asked her about it. The question sat right there in my throat. But I swallowed it. Told myself I was imagining things. That I was being paranoid. That trust meant not interrogating the person you married over something you could not prove. Looking back, that was the moment I started losing ground. Not because she did anything new that night, but because I chose not to see what was already there. After that, I started noticing more. Her phone was always face down now. Always within reach. She smiled at it sometimes, quick and private, like there was a conversation happening just outside my view. When I walked into the room, the screen went dark. Not in a dramatic way. Just subtle enough to be deniable. Everything about it was subtle. That is what made it effective. It gave me just enough uncertainty to keep me from acting. But not enough to stop me from thinking. And once you start thinking like that, you do not really stop. You just get quieter about it. I did not confront her. I did not accuse. I watched. I paid attention. I started keeping track of the details she thought I was too distracted to notice. The times she left. The times she came back. The patterns in her schedule. I even checked the laundry more carefully than I ever had before. That is how I realized the shirt was not just missing. It had been taken. There is a difference between losing something and it being removed from your life without permission. That difference matters. Because one is an accident. The other is a choice. And choices leave trails, whether people realize it or not. Standing there in the kitchen, with my phone still silent and the night stretching out in front of me, I understood something clearly for the first time. This was not about catching her anymore. It was about understanding the shape of what she had already built behind my back. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. That shirt was not gone by mistake. It was exactly where it was supposed to be. Just not with me. The next morning came without answers, which was exactly what I expected. No message from Lily. No missed calls. Just a clean, empty thread like nothing had happened. That told me more than any explanation she could have given. People who are innocent respond quickly. People who are caught hesitate. They calculate. I moved through my morning the same way I always did. Coffee at 6:30, shower by 7, out the door by 7:30. Routine has a way of keeping you grounded, even when everything underneath it starts to shift. But that morning, every small detail felt sharper. The sound of the coffee maker. The way the sunlight hit the kitchen counter. Even the empty space in the closet where that navy blue shirt used to hang. I paused there for a second longer than usual, just looking at it. It is strange how something so small can carry so much weight once you understand what it represents. By the time I got to my car, my mind was already working through possibilities. Not emotions. Not anger. Just patterns. If there is one thing I am good at, it is recognizing patterns. It is part of my job, part of how I think. And Lily's behavior had a pattern now. Predictable. Repeatable. Which meant it could be followed. I did not go straight to the office that day. Instead, I took a detour. There is a parking garage 2 blocks from her building, one that most people do not use unless they know it is there. I parked on the 3rd level, far enough back that my car would not stand out, and waited. Not for long. About 20 minutes after 9 I saw her. Same car. Same pace. Same posture she had every morning. Confident. Composed. Nothing about her suggested she was carrying a secret. She stepped out, adjusted her bag, checked her phone, and walked inside like it was just another normal day. I did not follow her in. There was no point. I was not there to confront her. I was there to confirm something simpler. That her day started where she said it did. It did. Which meant whatever she was hiding, it was not happening during office hours. That narrowed things down. I left the garage and drove toward my office, but I did not rush. I let the drive stretch out, thinking through the timeline again. The late dinners. The delayed returns. The missing shirt. It all pointed to one thing. Evenings. Predictable windows where she said she was working, but something else was happening instead. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. Just a message. Short. Careful. What do you mean? I looked at it for a few seconds before opening it. No punctuation beyond the question mark. No emotion in the words. Just confusion, or at least the performance of it. I did not reply. Not yet. There is power in letting someone sit with uncertainty. Especially when they know there is something they should be worried about, but they do not know how much you know. That space does the work for you. I set the phone down and continued with my day like nothing had changed. Meetings. Emails. Conversations. From the outside, everything was normal. But underneath it, something else was taking shape. I was not reacting anymore. I was building a clearer picture. And pictures like that do not need guesses. They need confirmation. That evening, I left work earlier than usual. Not to go home. Home could wait. Instead, I drove toward a part of the city Lily had mentioned a few times in passing. Upscale restaurants. Quiet bars. The kind of places where business dinners happen. Or at least where they are supposed to. I parked across the street from one of them and sat there, engine off, watching the entrance. I did not know if she would show up. But I knew this was where the pattern led. And if there is one thing about patterns, it is this. They always repeat. You just have to be there when they do. I waited 23 minutes before she showed up. Long enough for doubt to try and creep in, not long enough for me to leave. The restaurant across the street had a soft glow to it, the kind of place that looked expensive without trying too hard. Dim lighting, valet out front, people stepping in dressed like they had somewhere important to be afterward. It fit her story perfectly. That was the problem. It all fit too well. At exactly 6:58, her car pulled up. I recognized it immediately. Same smooth stop, same controlled movements. She stepped out, adjusting her coat, checking her reflection in the window before handing the keys to the valet. Nothing rushed. Nothing nervous. If I did not know better, I would have believed this was exactly where she was supposed to be. She walked inside without hesitation. No looking around. No scanning the street. Just confidence. That told me something important. Whatever she was doing, she felt safe doing it here. I stayed in the car. Engine off, hands resting on the wheel, eyes fixed on the entrance. Minutes passed. People came and went. Couples. Small groups. A few solo diners. Then at 7:12, another car pulled up. Black sedan. Clean. Not flashy, but deliberate. The driver stepped out first. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Tall, relaxed posture, the kind of confidence that does not need to be announced. He handed his keys over, said something to the valet, then turned toward the entrance. And that is when I saw it. The shirt. Navy blue. Tailored fit. Mine. It sat on him like it had been made for him, like it belonged there now. For a second, everything went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the street around me. No anger. No spike in my chest. Just clarity. Clean and sharp. Like a picture finally coming into focus after being blurry for too long. Chris did not look around either. He walked straight inside, same as Lily had. No hesitation. No concern. That told me the rest of what I needed to know. This was not new. This was routine. Practiced. Comfortable. I checked the time again. 7:14. Then I did something I had not done before. I got out of the car. Not quickly. Not in a rush. Just steady. Controlled. I crossed the street, keeping my pace normal, like I belonged there as much as anyone else. The valet glanced at me, gave a polite nod, nothing more. To him, I was just another customer. Inside, the air was warmer. Low music, quiet conversations, the clink of glasses. I paused just past the entrance, letting my eyes adjust, scanning the room without making it obvious. It did not take long to find them. Back corner. Booth seating. Close enough for privacy, far enough from the main floor to avoid attention. Lily sat across from him, leaning slightly forward, her expression softer than I had seen it in months. Not forced. Not polite. Genuine. That was new. That was something she had not brought home in a long time. Chris said something I could not hear, and she laughed. Not loud. Just enough to show comfort. Familiarity. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, taking it in. Not to hurt myself. Not to confirm what I already knew. But to understand the shape of it. The way they sat. The way they looked at each other. The ease between them. This was not an accident. This was a second life. I turned before either of them noticed me. No confrontation. No scene. That was not the point. The point was this. I had seen enough. More than enough. As I walked back out into the night air, something settled into place inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a decision forming, steady and quiet. Because now it was not about what they were doing. It was about what I was going to do next. I did not drive home right away. I sat in the car with the engine still off, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel, watching the reflection of the restaurant lights ripple across the windshield. There is a moment after you see something you cannot unsee where your mind tries to catch up with your reality. That was where I was. Not shocked. Not broken. Just recalibrating. For a long time, I believed marriage was built on conversations, on shared effort, on showing up even when things were not perfect. What I realized sitting there was that it only works if both people are playing the same game. And Lily had been playing something else entirely. I checked my phone again. Still no new messages from her. That silence felt different now. Not confusing. Not frustrating. Just predictable. She was not ignoring me because she did not understand what I said. She was ignoring me because she understood it perfectly. And she needed time to figure out how to respond without collapsing the version of reality she had been maintaining. I let the phone sit there and instead focused on what mattered next. Emotion is loud. It pushes you toward immediate reactions. But reactions are messy. They leave room for mistakes. What I needed was something cleaner. Something structured. I started the car, pulled out into the street, and drove without rushing, letting the rhythm of the road settle my thoughts. By the time I reached home, I was no longer thinking about what I had seen. I was thinking about what I could prove. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Lights off. Quiet. Unchanged. I stepped inside, set my keys on the counter, and walked through each room slowly, not because I expected anything to be different, but because I was seeing it differently now. The couch where we used to sit together. The kitchen where we shared routines that felt solid at the time. The bedroom where everything had started to drift without either of us saying it out loud. I stopped at the closet again. That empty space where the shirt used to be no longer felt like a question. It felt like evidence. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just one small, undeniable fact in a much larger pattern. I reached for my laptop and sat down at the kitchen table. This was the part most people skip. They go straight to confrontation, to arguments, to trying to force the truth out into the open. But the truth does not need to be forced if you already know where to look. I opened a few tabs. Banking. Shared accounts. Travel statements. Nothing invasive. Nothing illegal. Just information that already existed, waiting to be understood. Patterns again. Dates. Times. Transactions that lined up too neatly with her so-called work dinners. Payments at places she never mentioned. Small things on their own, but together they formed something clear. Consistent. Intentional. Around 9:45, I heard the front door unlock. Her timing was the same as always. Predictable. Practiced. I did not move from the table. I did not close the laptop. I just sat there, calm, steady, like I had been there all evening. She stepped inside, her expression neutral at first, then shifting the moment she saw me. Not fear. Not yet. But awareness. The kind that comes when someone realizes the room they walked into is not the one they expected. She set her bag down slowly, eyes flicking to the laptop, then back to me. "You are still up?" she asked, her voice measured, careful. I nodded once. "Yeah," I said, nothing more. Silence filled the space between us again, but this time it felt different. Heavier. More deliberate. She took a step closer, like she was testing the ground beneath her feet. "About your message earlier," she started, then paused, choosing her words. I watched her, not interrupting, not helping. Just letting her speak into the space she created. Because now, for the first time, she was the one trying to figure out what I knew. And I had no intention of making that easy for her. She did not finish her sentence right away. That was new. Lily had always been quick with words, quick with explanations, quick with turning uncertainty into something that sounded reasonable. But now she hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than anything she could have said. I closed the laptop slowly, not to hide anything, but to shift the focus back to her. "About my message," she repeated, this time a little steadier, like she had found a version of the story she was willing to try. "I do not know who Chris is, Ethan." The delivery was clean. Controlled. Practiced. If I had not seen what I saw earlier, if I had not followed the pattern all the way to its source, I might have believed her. That was the unsettling part. Not that she was lying, but how easily she could do it. I leaned back in the chair, studying her for a second longer than necessary. Not looking for cracks, just observing. The way her shoulders held tension. The way her eyes stayed locked on mine just a little too deliberately. She was not guessing anymore. She was performing. "You do not know him?" I asked, my voice even, not challenging, just repeating her words back to her. She shook her head immediately. "No. I mean, I might have met someone named Chris through work, but I do not know what you are implying." There it was. The pivot. From denial to confusion. From confusion to implied accusation. It was a smooth transition, one that gave her room to reposition if needed. I nodded once, like I was considering it. "That is interesting," I said, letting the words hang there without pushing them further. Silence followed again, but this time it was different. Not empty. Charged. She shifted her weight slightly, glancing toward the hallway for a split second before looking back at me. A small movement, but noticeable. People look for exits when they feel pressure. "Why would you say something like that?" she asked, softer now, less controlled. Not emotional, just careful. I did not answer right away. Instead, I stood up from the table, walked past her without touching, and headed toward the closet. I could feel her watching me, trying to anticipate what I was about to do, but not quite understanding it yet. I opened the closet door and stepped aside slightly, giving her a clear view of the empty space where the shirt used to be. "Do you remember this?" I asked, still calm. She looked at the space, then back at me. For a moment, there was nothing on her face. Then something shifted. Not enough for most people to notice, but enough for me. Recognition. Quickly buried. "It is just a shirt, Ethan," she said, almost dismissive, like she was trying to shrink the importance of it before I could expand on it. I nodded again. "Yeah," I said quietly. It is just a shirt. I let that sit for a second, then added, that I saw someone else wearing tonight. That was the first real break. Small, but undeniable. Her expression tightened, just for a fraction of a second, before she smoothed it out again. But it was enough. Once you see that shift, you cannot unsee it. You followed me? She asked, her tone changing, sharper now, redirecting the focus away from what I said and onto how I knew it. Another move. Another attempt to regain control of the narrative. I met her gaze steady. No, I said. I paid attention. The difference mattered. And she knew it. The room felt smaller after that. Not physically, but in the way the space between us closed and with everything that was no longer being said. She opened her mouth like she was about to respond, then stopped, recalculating. For the first time since she walked in, she did not have a clear next step. And that was where the balance shifted completely. Because now it was not about proving anything to her. It was about letting her realize, piece by piece, that whatever version of the story she had been controlling was already gone. She did not argue right away, and that was how I knew the ground beneath her had finally shifted. Not cracked, not unstable, but gone. Lily stood there for a second longer than usual, her eyes moving just slightly as if she was scanning for something she could still control. A version of this conversation where she could step back into the lead. But there was nothing left to grab onto. You are overthinking this, she said finally, but the confidence in her voice was thinner now, stretched too tight to hold. It was not a denial anymore. It was a delay. I watched her, not interrupting, not correcting. Just letting her continue if she wanted to. Silence has a way of pulling more truth out of people than questions ever could. She took a slow breath, then tried again. Even if you saw someone wearing your shirt, that does not mean anything. People borrow things. Things get mixed up. The explanation sounded reasonable on the surface. That was always her strength. But it did not match the reality I had already seen. Not the way they looked at each other. Not the way they sat. Not the way she smiled. You cannot borrow that kind of familiarity. It has to be built. You are right, I said quietly. On its own, it does not mean anything. I stepped past her, back toward the kitchen, keeping my tone steady, almost conversational. But it is not on its own. I opened the laptop again, not turning it toward her yet, just letting the screen light up the space between us. It is the shirt, I continued, and the dinners, and the timing, and the way your schedule changed without ever being explained. I tapped lightly on the table, not for emphasis, just to mark the rhythm of what I was saying. It is the charges at places you never mentioned. The nights that started to look the same. The patterns that do not happen by accident. I turned the laptop slightly then, just enough for her to see the screen. Nothing dramatic. No private messages. Just dates and locations, lined up cleanly in a way that did not need interpretation. She looked at it, and for the first time, she did not respond immediately. No quick explanation. No pivot. Just stillness. That was the moment the performance dropped. Not completely, but enough. You went through my things? She asked after a few seconds, but the question did not carry the same weight as before. It was not an accusation anymore. It was a reach for something familiar, something she could still push against. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. I looked at what was already there. That difference mattered. Because I had not crossed any lines to get here. I had just paid attention to what she assumed I would ignore. She closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them again, this time not quite meeting mine. Ethan, she started, her voice softer now, less structured. Not defensive. Not controlled. Something else. Something closer to real. I did not step in to help her. I did not fill the space. I let it stay exactly where it was. Because now, for the first time, she was not trying to manage the story. She was trying to figure out how much of it had already been seen. And that uncertainty was doing more than any confrontation ever could. I leaned back against the counter, folding my arms loosely, not closed off, just settled. You do not have to explain anything right now, I said calmly. I am not asking for that. She looked up at me then, confused by that, because it was not the response she expected. Most people demand answers at this point. They push. They escalate. But I was not interested in that. Not anymore. I already saw enough, I added, letting the words land without force. The room went quiet again, but this time it was different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just clear. Because the truth was no longer something hidden between us. It was sitting right there, fully understood, even if it had not been spoken out loud. And in that clarity, something else settled into place inside me. Not anger. Not regret. Just a final realization. I was no longer trying to save what we had. I was deciding what to do after it. She did not speak for a long time after that, and I let her have that silence because it was doing the work for me. When people run out of explanations, they are left with choices, and choices reveal more than words ever will. Lily walked past me slowly, not in a rush, not trying to escape, just moving like she needed a second to stand somewhere that was not directly in front of the truth. She set her hands on the edge of the counter, staring down at the surface like she might find something there that could help her rebuild control. But there was nothing left to rebuild. How long? She asked finally, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it, stripped of the confidence she usually carried. It was not a denial anymore. Not confusion. Just a question that told me she already knew the answer would not help her. I thought about it for a second, not because I needed to calculate, but because I wanted to be precise. Long enough, I said. Not a number. Not a date. Just the truth in the simplest form. She nodded slightly, like she understood what that meant without needing anything more specific. Because once you see a pattern clearly, the exact starting point stops mattering. It is the consistency that defines it. It was not supposed to be like this, she said after a moment, almost to herself. That line felt familiar. Not because she had said it before, but because it was the kind of thing people say when they are trying to soften something that was built deliberately. I did not respond. I let her continue if she wanted to explain, but I did not invite it. She turned slightly, leaning back against the counter now, arms crossing loosely, not defensive, just holding herself together. It just happened, she added, and even she did not sound convinced by it. That is the thing about stories like that. They only work when the other person still wants to believe them. I did not challenge her. I did not correct her version of events. There was no point. I had already seen the reality. Words were just an attempt to reshape it into something easier to sit with. You do not have to explain it, I said again, calm, steady, not dismissive, just final. She looked at me then, really looked this time, like she was trying to understand what had changed. And I could see it in her expression. She was expecting anger. A raised voice. Something she could respond to, something she could push against. But there was nothing like that coming from me. Just clarity. And that made it harder for her, not easier. So what happens now? She asked, and that was the first honest question she had asked all night. Not about the past. Not about what I knew. About what came next. I took a slow breath, letting it out evenly, not rushing the answer because this was the only part that actually mattered. Now? I repeated, more to mark the shift than to stall. I looked around the room for a second, taking in the space differently now. Not as a shared place, but as something I was already stepping away from. Now I stop pretending this is something it is not, I said quietly. No drama. No final speech. Just a simple line that carried everything it needed to. She absorbed that without interrupting, her expression tightening slightly, not in anger, but in realization. Because she understood what that meant. Not just for tonight, but for everything that came after. I pushed off the counter and walked past her again, heading toward the hallway, not looking back this time. Not because I was trying to make a statement, but because I did not need to watch her reaction to know it had landed. Some moments do not need confirmation. You feel them settle. And as I reached the doorway, I realized something else, something that had been building quietly since the first message I sent. I was not losing anything in that moment. I had already lost it long before. What I was doing now was simply acknowledging it. And once you do that, once you stop holding on to something that no longer exists, there is a kind of stillness that replaces it. Not empty. Not cold. Just clear. The kind of clarity that does not ask for permission to move forward. The hallway felt longer as I walked through it, not because it had changed, but because I had, every step steady and deliberate, not rushed, not heavy, just certain. And behind me I heard Lily shift like she was about to speak before stopping herself, that hesitation following me all the way to the bedroom where I stepped inside without closing the door. There was no need for distance anymore. Everything that mattered was already understood. I moved to the dresser and opened the top drawer, not searching, just looking at the familiar order of folded clothes, unchanged, ordinary, almost out of place against what had already shifted beneath it. And it struck me how life can remain visually intact even after its foundation is gone. I picked up a watch I hadn't worn in months, turning it slowly in my hand, not because it mattered but because it gave my thoughts somewhere to settle, that quiet calm settling in, not relief, but clarity without resistance, the kind that comes when you stop trying to fix what cannot be fixed. Lily appeared in the doorway moments later, not stepping fully inside, just watching me carefully, trying to understand what version of me was standing there now. "You're just going to walk away?" she asked, her voice no longer controlled, just uncertain. I set the watch down and turned to face her. "No," I said calmly. "I already did." And the truth of it sat between us, because walking away doesn't always begin with movement, sometimes it happens long before. She held my gaze, searching for something that wasn't there anymore. "So that's it?" she asked quietly, and I nodded once. "That's it." No anger, no argument, just finality. She glanced down, then back up, something shifting in her expression as she realized control was gone. "Ethan," she started but stopped, knowing it led nowhere, and I didn't step in to help, didn't soften anything, because clarity didn't need it. I closed the drawer, walked past her, and this time she didn't stop me. Didn't ask anything else, just stood there in the silence. And as I moved through the house, everything felt different, not because it had changed, but because I had, the familiar details no longer holding me in place. I picked up my keys, paused briefly, not to reconsider but to recognize the moment, then stepped outside into the cool night air. And as the door closed behind me, it was clear. I wasn't walking into uncertainty. I was leaving something that had already ended, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like the most honest step forward.